In this series, I'm going to do something a little bit different. Normally I take each component of the project, break it into chapters, and show you how to complete that component start to finish. In reality, this is a pretty inefficient way to actually make the project. There's going to be times where you're either waiting for glue to dry and set up, or you're waiting for your edge paint to dry. So in this series, I'm going to attempt to present it in a way that reflects how I actually made the bag from start to finish. So you may find that I'm jumping back and forth from one part to the next, but this is actually how I make the bag in a more time-efficient manner. A full list of materials and hardware is included in the plans. If you want to get those, head over to my website. You can download them there. Let's get into it. I use my laser to cut out the two sides and the gusset. For the straps, they are too large for my laser bed, so I'm going to cut these out by hand. There are many methods I could have used to cut out these straps, but for me, measuring it and using my X-Acto blade is the most accurate. To ensure that I get an accurate cut, I actually add 0.5 millimeter to my measurement. That seems to account nicely for the blade width. I use the paper template to mark both ends, as well as the transition from the wide part to the narrow part of the strap. Whenever I have a straight line to cut that's longer than 2 or 3 inches, I always use a ruler to back up my X-Acto so that everything stays nice and straight. I use my paper template to mark out my stitch spacing. I only mark every 9th hole, which matches my largest iron size. If you're using a different stitch spacing, then go ahead, set your dividers to 3 mil, and then mark out your stitch spacing with the iron size that you have. I added Velodon to the wide part of the strap to ensure that it isn't going to stretch out over time. Since the bottom thinner part is stitched in place, there's no worries that that portion of the strap is going to stretch out. With my reinforcement in place, I then added glue to my straps and their backing and got them all glued up. I started with my main panels and decided to pre-punch them before adding the lining. I realized after doing this that I probably should have added the lining and then punched all the way through, because now I'm going to have to glue the lining on and then punch it again. The reason I pre-punch this is because my lining edges are going to get skived out. Sometimes I've had issues in the past where the angle of the skive has actually caused issues with punching and getting the holes spaced correctly on the bottom side of the punch. This turned out not to be an issue because my lining is only 0.5 millimeter thick. Because the zipper is going to get stitched between the main panel and its lining, I need to pre-finish this edge before I install the zipper. Gluing down my lining to the main panels, I trace a quick little outline on my panels so I know where to glue. I'm also going to run a guideline that's about 1 inch down from the top of the panel. This is lining up right with the part of the panel where it narrows down, and that's the part I'm not going to glue. That isn't getting glued down because, like I said, the zipper is going to sit between the panel and its lining, so I need some room to work when I finally glue the zipper in place. Before I glue these in place, I do need to skive out the edge of this lining right out to 0 so that it keeps my edge to about 3 mil once it's all glued up. One thing to note about skiving this really soft, thin leather is that you need a very sharp skiving knife. If your skiving knife isn't sharp enough, then you're going to end up putting a lot more pressure on the leather, and in my experience, this soft, thin leather will stretch out, and then that will actually impact how it glues in place, because skiving out to 0 on your edge is not going to line up with your main panel. You'll see shortly, even though I cut this to the exact size of the main panel, I do have a bit of an overhang once this gets glued in place, and that was from this skiving that I stretched out the leather just slightly. This mark is my glue line so that I know not to add glue on the top portion of that panel. You'll see here I start messing with this edge because it's not lining up exactly, and I'm thinking I just glued it down wrong. So I go ahead, I peel it back, line up that edge, and then realize that I'm going to be left with the bulge in the middle if I do that. So I pull it back, line it up flat, and then just make sure everything is nice and smooth, and then I'm left with a little bit extra on the edge, which I will trim off. The gusset panel has 3 reinforcement points. On each end, it's reinforced with some heavyweight cardstock, and the bottom has a piece of salpa which holds the bag feet and provides a bit of structure to the base. I skive the edge of the salpa leather out to 0 so that you don't feel that reinforcement or see it once the lining is glued in place. Salpa is a really good option for reinforcement. You can get it anywhere from 0.5 millimeter right up to 2 millimeters thick. In the previous series, I used Brio as the base reinforcement. It's a really good option if you're using a bit of a softer leather. Because of the rigidity of Brio, it's going to add a lot of support. In this case, since I'm using 3 to 4 ounce veg tan, I don't need that level of support or structure, so salpa is a really good option. I use the guide piece that's included in the plans to make these marks on the inside so that I know I was placing my reinforcement panels in the correct location. The last step in the gusset before we install the lining is adding the bag feet. The bag feet that I'm using on this have a compression fitting for the back post. You want about 3 millimeters of that post sticking beyond the leather so that it compresses properly and holds nice and secure. The zipper preparation on this one is pretty straightforward. You're just going to fold over the tape so that it sits perpendicular to the zipper teeth. To make sure this doesn't come apart before it's installed, I'm just going to melt the end. The other end of the zipper gets a little leather patch to cap it off. Because this zipper runs long and you're going to be able to see both sides of this leather patch, I'm going to double punch this so that each side is perfectly clean. If you want your zipper to stop along the top of the bag itself, then you're just going to need to trim your zipper to length, install the end stop, and then finish off the end of the zipper the way we did on the other side. You're going to want to pre-finish the 2 edges that rest along the zipper, because once this is glued in place, you won't have access to them. I'm going to taper off the end of the zipper so that it finishes nice and clean within the leather patch. So to do that, I'm going to remove the rib along the zipper tape, measure back about 15 millimeters or so, cut that out, use a lighter to melt the inside of that tape, and then overlap the two edges and glue it in place. Your zipper is likely going to have an end stop on it. Mine doesn't, so I overlap the leather patch by one tooth so that if the zipper pull gets to the end, the whole zipper tape won't come undone. Otherwise, I would have installed this leather patch right up against the edge of that end stop. Then it's just a matter of stitching the leather patch in place and finishing off the remaining edges. So now I'm going to jump back to the straps and get the stitching holes punched on all of these. With my straps punched out, I can now trim the lining to the final width on the straps and the main body. Something to note when you're adding the glue to the front panel of the bag: only have the glue on the outside edge of your stitch holes. Due to the construction of this bag, you're going to be able to see right inside against that stitch line. So if any glue is beyond it, you're going to see it on the outside of the bag. I use the needle to mark that center hole to make sure my strap is going to line up correctly, and then work it around the edge, and then put another needle into the opposite end at the top of the bag. I'm going to finish part 1 here. If you haven't already, head over to my website, norfolkhandmade.com, to get your plans. And if you have any questions on this bag, let me know in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.